Hi. Let us call this meeting of January 13th, 2021 to order. Let's have a roll call. Thank you.
Earl Bradford, Stacy Burnett, Florence Kaplow, Daniel Larson, Megan McKissick.
Present.
Thank you. Peter Resnick.
Here.
Francis Rigberg.
Here.
Julie Robinson Schaefer.
Here.
Thank you.
Very good. I believe we have a quorum. And now I will ask for a motion to approve the agenda for this evening.
So moved.
A second, please.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. We have a roll call of votes for that. Yes.
Quick discussion.
Yeah.
I know that we
Yes,
have
I'm
a
sorry.
visitor this evening. Elizabeth, do you know if they want to move up to the front of the agenda, like before we do old business?
Jason, can you tell me, I need to find the gentleman's name here real quick.
There's a Daniel Wilson on.
Daniel Wilson is here.
That's who we want. So yes, I'm guessing he would appreciate it if we would move that up closer to the front.
Okay, and I've just promoted Daniel to a panelist.
Okay.
So in that case, can I amend my own motion to approve the agenda, but moving Mr. Wilson up to just after public participation? And I believe
That's
whoever
fine.
seconded
Okay.
has to approve that.
Second.
Okay, who is that who seconded? I'm sorry.
Megan.
Disadvantage.
Sorry.
Okay, Megan,
Megan.
thank you. Okay, so moved by Pete and seconded by Megan. Let's have a roll call of the votes for that motion.
Megan McKissick,
Yes.
Peter Resnick,
Yes.
Francis Rigberg,
Yes?
Julie Schaefer.
Yes.
Okay, the motion has passed. So we will now go to approval of the minutes for our previous two meetings, December 9th, 2020 and December 15th, special meeting of 2020. Someone move to approve the minutes, please?
I'll move to approve the minutes of the December 9th and December 15th, 2020 meetings.
All right, do we have a second, please?
I'll second. It's Megan again.
Thank you. Yes, hi, Megan. Okay, I'm so frustrated. I can't see people. This has never happened. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes for December 9th and December 15th. Tamara, roll call vote, please.
Megan McKissick,
Yes.
Peter Resnick,
Yes.
Francis Rigberg,
Yes?
Julie Schaefer.
Yes.
The motion passes. We will now move on to public participation. I can't see a thing, so if somebody wish to speak.
Christopher Hansen has his hand up.
Alrighty. Christopher, please go ahead.
And by the way, Mr. Wilson, you may want to mute just so if you're while you're waiting.
Thank you. Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, just fine.
Okay.
My name is Christopher Hansen. I've lived in Urbana for 18 years. I've spoken to your board a number of times. Welcome to the new faces. It's like nice to see the board almost full. I think you guys have maybe one more spot to fill, if I understand that right. At the city council meeting on Monday, I encouraged the mayor to reach out to the First Followers group to consider filling that extra seat. And I don't know to what extent the board wants to play a role in urging the mayor to, find certain groups of people to fill those seats. But if you agree with that idea, maybe you could send a note to her. The issue at hand most frequently at hand with the HRC, or more frequently at hand rather, is whether the human rights ordinance in Urbana should apply not just to the people of Urbana and not just to the businesses and individual groups and different associations in Urbana. We know it doesn't apply to all those groups. The question is, does it apply to the Urbana city government itself? And the fact that we have to contemplate this for so many months, coming up on a year now maybe, is frankly just embarrassing. And this group has heard, well, with the exception of the new members, of course, this group has heard repeatedly from the public that, yes, clearly it should apply to the city. Clearly the city should follow its own anti-discrimination laws in regards to its own hiring practices. And this board at a hearing in November came to the same conclusion. And that conclusion was thrown out by city administration. And this board was essentially just walked all over. And I haven't really heard much in terms of what the plan is going forward on that. It's desirable that there's a legal action taken on that issue to actually get something moving, or are we going to, kind of see some action from within our own government to make that situation right? But what concerns me is the HRC was apparently, it sounded like you were moving in the direction of suggesting that the council clarify the human rights ordinance language to make it crystal clear that the city of Urbana government is to follow and comply with and be subject to the human rights ordinance, which is what everyone I know, the exception of Carol Mitten, the city administrator, thinks should be the case. And it sounds like now that Carol Mitten has stepped in and done what she does best, which is to be an obstructionist, it sounds like this board is kind of capitulating and just kind of backing off. And I wonder if this board, the members on it, are made up of people who joined and applied to be on this board because they desired to capitulate to, unscrupulous action and corruption and misconduct by the government, or if maybe the people on this board applied and desired to be members of this board because they were the type of people more in an activist role and in a role where they wanted to see equality everywhere. So I urge you not to just give in to the desires of staff who clearly don't hold the interests and values of the people of Urbana as the most important motive for their interests. And I urge you to do what you think is right and what the public has said is right. And let's actually have an Urbana that makes sense and not one that's just hypocritical and embarrassing. So, and when you're discussing this, I think the question that you've been asking is the wrong question. You've been asking, what if we actually do include the city? And you've been discussing the possible negative and maybe some positive outcomes of that. I think the question you should ask is, what if we go forward and we say the city is exempt and isn't included in our human rights ordinance? What bad things will happen if that's the route we go down? Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Okay. I'm making one more effort to join. It's not working. Okay.
There is no one else with their hand
Is there
up.
another person? All right, please go ahead.
No, there is no one else with their hand up at the moment.
There was no one else. Okay, no more public participation, and we're going to move on to our guest.
And it's Daniel Wilson.
Who's that, please? Daniel Wilson. Can you please introduce yourself and or what is your desire in coming here?
Certainly. Thank you guys for letting me join in this evening. My name is Danny Wilson. I'm the project manager and EEO officer for Deuce Construction Company. We're a large construction company in town. We had lucky enough to do a lot of work for the city of Urbana directly, which we appreciate. My desire in coming here tonight is really to learn kind of how the policy and procedure manual that we follow to based on our employment and our core employees, how that kind of the metrics that the committee utilizes to deem persons fit, unfit. Really, this is, I mean, it stemmed from a little bit of frustration on my behalf because we try really hard and we've always been given a provisional stance. So I really just wanted to learn. I'm not here to complain. I'm here to join and learn, really, because I completely agree that there's disparity, especially in the building trades that I'm privy to. But just wanted to just open it up and just have a discussion about it if you had time is main reason.
So Fran, do you mind if I start?
Yes. No, go ahead. I'm very glad you're here, Danny.
Thank
Okay,
you.
go ahead, Pete.
So, and I don't know if you've watched any of our meetings before, but the way we do this is we take a look at the workforce statistics and see if they're more or less, and we don't go by any exact number, more or less within the demographics of the area. And if they're not, we generally ask contractors or vendors to provide us with some of the information about what they're doing to basically make sure that they're getting a diverse pool of applicants, that everybody from the city knows that those jobs are available, et cetera, and so forth. If I'm not mistaken, Deuce is one of our contractors who uses union labor. And so is that right?
That is correct, sir. Yes.
And so, you know, and we've had this discussion several times before, but that more or less you're dealt the hand that the union gives you as far as workers, and you can ask them, well, we'd like as diverse a workforce as you can provide, but who they provide is who they provide.
That in a nutshell, sir, that is exactly what it is. But, you know, we at Deuce Construction, I can't speak for all of the union contractors that work in the city as a whole, but we try and take as much of a proactive stance as possible. But I just actually reached out to my unions today. I only have like 3 unions that I specifically use, and I asked for a demographic pool of their union, meaning how many minorities, how many females, and how many total total members do they have. And statistically right now amongst the unions that we use, which are the laborers local 703, finishers local 143, and the operating engineers 841, each one of them have approximately a 4.5 to 5.5% total, what I'll just say minority, be it female, right. Whatever. And we as a company overall are a little over 10%. So I feel very positive about that. However, I was really just coming to learn, and I really appreciate your description, because I'm sure that when poised against the demographic of the area, I am falling superiorly short, I'm sure.
Well, and let me say, part of the issue here is we have a certain amount of history look back into what's going on as far as, you know, oh, well, another Deuce has come up again, and, you know, what are we going to do about that? So one of the things from your perspective to get a longer term certification is to sort of document for us in the next go round of application. And by the way, just a little side note, Elizabeth has been doing great as our stand-in officer here, but the problem is it's not Elizabeth's job, and we've got this open position. So part of the problem is we need to develop a plan for situations like yours, and we really haven't gotten there. And once we get the new officer on board, we hope to do that. Mm-hmm. But part one is for you to document sort of the efforts you're taking to, you know, to make your workforce as diverse as reasonable as, you know, as you can in this community. And the other thing that has to happen is really in our lap, which is we've always had a procedure for talking to contractors, and we're supposed to talk to unions as well to get them to document what they're doing, so we have some reference of, oh, they're making an effort too, and this is how they're making the effort. And that we haven't come up with yet.
Okay.
And that's on our list of things to do once the new officer comes on board, is how can, you know, folks like Deuce say, look, we're getting from this union, and here's the things we're doing for ourselves, but please talk to this union. And we can look at the union's paperwork and say, okay, and the union is doing what they can to increase their diversity. And that way you don't get dinged for the state of the world as it is today. We can see that everybody is making the effort to do the right thing. And then we can say, okay, 2 years, and we'll look back and see what we're doing after 2 years.
Okay. Well, with that being said, which I appreciate that, sir, because it's that is the right way to look at it from our perspective. Is it's almost a case by case basis, unfortunately, which puts the onus and more work on your guys' good committee. In talking to my unions today, rather than talking to each individual union, which I believe there's something like 20, you know, for everything. There is what's called the East Central Illinois Building and Trades. I don't know if you have heard that name before, but it is actually a collective group, much like yourselves, that meet once a month and deal with situations of diversity. They deal with what projects are coming up to make sure that all the unions know the work is coming. And they just went through this very situation with the University of Illinois. So they have all their numbers pulled right now as of end of year, and the U of I is having them do this same type of thing. It just might be a great time to strike while the iron's hot and kind of ride the coattails of the U of I. When anybody else can charge forward and you could follow, if you ever need any information with that, I'd happily give that up to whomever. But they're a very good committee. I've sat in many of their meetings and get questioned about projects that are upcoming. Just so you know, that was it.
And Fran, we're not necessarily hearing you on your computer, but if you press *6 on your phone again, I think we're still going to use your phone audio there. Now we should be able to hear you.
Okay, thank you. This is weird. Something must have changed in Zoom. Anyway, I'm here and I can see people occasionally. I'm very glad that we had Danny here. That gives us a good idea of how to proceed here, I think. Perhaps someone would like to move that we get in touch with the Central Illinois Buildings and Trades and get something started with them.
Yeah, I don't know that we necessarily need a motion, Fran. I think we can,
okay.
if you can find volunteers to do that, let's do it. Because I think that, you know, what Danny was saying does make the most sense. Is we don't want to keep taking him every 6 months with filling out the stupid form, or every year, or whatever it is.
And it's stupid, but and I don't want to.
No.
No.
At least let me rephrase, tedious form, because that is. There's lots of numbers to be filled in. And we do want to get where the union's at. And we've wanted to get that information for some time and make sure that, and you know, it may be the case that we're going to find out that one union is doing a great job and one union really hasn't, you know, done their stuff, and we want to work with them and get them to do the right thing. So I think this is a great plan.
And not to interrupt you, if you do reach out to some of these unions, I know that in talking with, where all unions are struggling, whether they're whatever skin color, race, or gender, we're all struggling. We're not keeping up with the times to keep those spaces filled. So, you know, a lot of us, all the unions, and even many of us contractors are on what's also called the Highway Construction Careers Training Program. That is an IDOT sponsored program at Parkland, which is it's a pre-apprenticeship program that is targeted to minorities and those of a lower financial demographic to get them into the unions. So we're trying everything we can as a team, and anything you guys could assist with, they would take it with open arms, I know.
I believe that. Other people, other companies that we've talked to have had the same support for this effort that you have shown. And it's very gratifying. And I hope we can make some progress here. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you guys for letting me just listen in. I was, I think I've kind of, you've answered the few questions that I had. It was more of a clarification more than a complaint. And do feel free to reach out to myself personally. If I can funnel you to the right persons at the proper unions, I most certainly will do so. Email's an amazing thing. You can get to it when you get to it, and it works. So,
and we are, I mean, part of our mission is to help you figure out how to, get this stuff done. And so, if we, can come in and help you, okay, what forms do I need to do? What kinds of programs do I need to set up to make sure that the commission instantly goes, oh, yep, those guys we know, they're doing great. And if there are folks who are resistant, kind of walk them through why we do this, and it's not painful, and it is for good stuff. So.
Oh no, most definitely for good things. So I really don't have any other items to add. I just wanted to listen and speak. Honestly, my certification might be on the agenda for this evening. I'm not sure. But if there is something more requested, required, wanted from Deuce Construction, I will happily provide to whomever needs it. So.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
That's great. It's good to meet you.
Thank you guys for your time, and I'll let you get on with the rest of your meeting. You guys have a wonderful evening.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Well, that's encouraging. Very encouraging. We will now go on to our unfinished business, which will be proposed changes to our ordinance. These having to do with, as public participation mentioned, this having to do with the application of the ordinance to the city itself and what that would mean one way or the other, and whether we want to make a recommendation to the city on this matter. So I'll give that over to Pete.
So I'll do a quick review so that Megan and Julie can come up to speed here. And I know we're asking you to jump in and vote on something your first night with maybe having just read it over in the last couple of days, but I'll try and make this as easy as possible. So the question has come up. There are two sections of the ordinance that talk to oh, and by the way, Fran, I probably, if *6 mute and *6 unmute, you may want to mute your phone in between because there's a little echo. So there's a particular section of the ordinance which is unclear, and some of the definitions are unclear as to whether Article 3 of the ordinance, which is the process for dealing with complaints, applies to the city. So we're not talking about the entire ordinance. There's pieces of the ordinance where there's clear, the city does this and the commission interacts with the city in this way or that way, all through Division 2, the main body of the top of the ordinance. But the complaint procedure and eventually if there is a hearing, that stuff, it's not entirely clear what applies to the city and what doesn't. They're in the definitions of people who can be respondents, who can be charged with violating the ordinance. Listed is government agency. But then if you go down to the bottom of the ordinance where it says exclusions, there's a line which says, this ordinance shall not apply to other government agencies including federal, state, municipal, et cetera. We've had discussions about this. I've gone back and looked at the changes from 1975 on, when the ordinance was first made, and the changes since. And to me, it looks like no one ever really went back and did a full edit to explain what they precisely meant. So I came up with some text, which I think you have the markup of, to make changes to the ordinance, both to explicitly include the city as part of who can enforcement be brought against, or to exclude the city, to say that the city can't be part of, it can't be a respondent to a case. The main argument for excluding is that if the city were to be included, and you'll see in the changes that I made, that you've got the problem where the city attorney or the human rights officer is on the hook to prosecute the case. And the case is brought in the name of the city of Urbana. And so there's this goofy kind of, okay, well then the city is gonna have to file a case against itself. And Mr. Hansen mentioned this, which seems odd. And so the changes I included, if we're gonna include the city, are basically to describe, well, we're gonna have to hire a special prosecutor to deal with that. And the city's gonna have to be responsible for the chart, for the costs of doing so. And then the case will be brought in the name of the commission. And there's a section I included for, describing what a conflict of interest is and what to do in that case, so that you could have it set up. It doesn't completely solve the conundrum, because you've still got the case where, well, wait a minute, the Human Relations Commission is an agency of the city, and what if someone on the commission or the commission itself does something discriminatory? It's not clean, but it's workable. The exclude form basically says, no, the city is not subject to Article 3. They're subject to the rest, not subject to Article 3. And then I separately made a paragraph, and I made one edit since the one I sent out to, I think, you all, which basically says if the city is doing something that is a discriminatory practice and a citizen wants to report that to the commission, they can do so, and then the commission will work with the city to eliminate that practice. It does leave the possibility that, the city eventually says, nope, we think that's a good practice and we're going to keep it. And the commission will say, no, we don't think it is, and there will be this conflict. At the end of the day, the city gets to say what it's going to do, and then it's up to voters to figure out what to do about that. But it's a simpler set of changes. So we basically have three choices in my view. We can either have a resolution that says the city should be included and here are the changes we think you should make. We can say we think the city should be excluded from Article 3 and here are the changes to clarify that. And here's this additional piece that says the city commits to not discriminating, and here's how we'll handle it if a citizen believes that they have been discriminated against. Or choice 3 is we say the commission doesn't have a strong opinion one way or the other, so we our resolution would be, we need you to clarify what you mean, city council, by this, and leave the question to the city council and provide both sets of changes and let the city council figure it out. I am personally a bit ambivalent. I like the idea in principle of saying that the city can be subject to a complaint. But if that happens, it turns out to be a pain to go through all of the little processes to make that happen. I would be okay with any of the three choices if we decide tonight to go with them. But that's where we are. And I wrote up some resolution sounding text to go on top of the recommendations. It's pretty, simplistic, whereas we think this should be clarified and whereas these are the sections that need to be clarified, we go ahead. So that's where we're at. So Fran, I guess the question is, do you want me to make a motion and then we discuss? Do we want to have Megan, you, Julie, ask me questions for a bit before I make a motion? What is your preference? And you need to *6 yourself to unmute.
Yes. Well, first of all, Pete and Daniel, I believe, helped with
Yep.
this as well. Thank you,
Of course.
because you've done a very good job of making it clear and giving us some clear choices here. So thanks for that. I believe that we should, well, we can have discussion without there being a motion on the floor.
Sure.
So I'd like to open up I would like to say one thing, and that is that let's remember that just because a person or an entity is not subject to a law doesn't mean they're going to break that law. So let's not make it look like if the city is not subject to this, that they're going to do all kinds of terrible things. So I just like to make that comment, because sometimes, for example, people who have a religion think that a person who doesn't have religious beliefs is going to tear the legs off puppies, and that isn't not necessarily so. So anyway, I think these are all very clear and interesting possibilities, and I believe I'd be comfortable with any of them. But I'd like to open the floor to discussion by the other commissioners. Would anybody like to speak on that or ask a question?
I do have a question, and I apologize. I've read through and have the basic understanding of what the three options are, but I guess I'd be curious to know if there are other cities with similar ordinances and how they're managed. If the same thing applies, have we done any research into that to say, oh, well, here's some language that very clearly excludes them? Or is it one of those cases where, as usual, one of them includes, one of them excludes, one of them leaves it up to the commission, one of them, and doesn't help?
So the one example, I believe Champaign does not include. One example that we found where there is inclusion is at the state level. So you can bring a complaint against a state agency to the Illinois Department of Human Rights. The difference there is, first of all, the Illinois Department of Human Rights is a big agency. They have lots of resources, and they can keep themselves relatively separated from the rest of state government. So there's a reasonable set of firewalls in between, so that if this person is conflicted out, that person can take over the case, et cetera, and so forth. The other key difference with IDHR is that if you go to a full hearing, you personally, as a complainant, are responsible to pick up the charges. You're prosecuting the case. It's you versus the respondent. When you get to that final stage, the IDHR will negotiate and do all of the conciliation stuff that our HRO does. But if you want to go to a full hearing, you're responsible. City of Urbana is different. The case is normally the City of Urbana versus the respondent, and the complainant is really not part of the picture at that point. And so, yes, government agencies are subject to IDHR, both at the state level and at municipal levels. but it is the only case that we found where there's a clear path. I don't know about Chicago city government. I haven't checked. I suspect it's the same sort of thing, is if they include it, it's because they've got a big enough agency at the city level. But I think they go to IDHR for most complaints.
Thank you. That does help. You know, I am fairly familiar with conflict of interest principles, and can certainly see the quandary we're in including the city within the ordinance and being subject to it. So.
Megan, you're still muted.
I'm muted. Yep. Okay, there we go. I'm not supposed to Zoom. There we go. So in theory, if someone had a complaint that if it wasn't the city of Urbana would come to us, but if it is against the city of Urbana, they could take it to the state level, but they would just be responsible for that cost. So there is still that kind of check-in almost. They're held to that set of standards. Is
So
that kind of the situation, or?
two things about that. Yes, you can bring a complaint to IDHR. And as a matter of fact, while we have no HRO to do investigations, Elizabeth has been handing as many cases as she can over to IDHR to deal with those. The cost for, up until you get to a full hearing, there's no particular cost other than your time for IDHR to investigate the complaint, to negotiate with you and the respondent to certify the complaint. It's only when you get to that final stage. Again, as far as I can tell. The other issue with going to the state is that our city ordinance is much broader than state law. So under our city ordinance, we include things like matriculation status. So you can't discriminate against someone just because they're a student, or which in this town is an important, characteristic. You can't discriminate against someone, and the list is much longer than what is available at the state. So if, for instance, the city or anybody discriminated on the basis of your student status, of your family status, then you couldn't bring it to the state. You'd have to bring it to the city if you were going to bring it anywhere. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. So just because they may have a case here, they may not have it higher up.
At IDHR, yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to add that in our ordinance, it isn't just a list of things that you can't discriminate against. It's also anything that characterizes the person as a member of a group rather than their individual merits in relationship to the opportunity. So it's very sweeping in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something unanticipated. Yes. I'm sorry, did somebody?
So, I mean, I can make a motion and flip the coin and decide which way we're going. I'm also just as glad to put it in the city council's lap. And let me describe the process. So we make this resolution, we recommend such and so. Our resolution basically goes to the mayor, and the mayor and city staff are going to go to council and make a recommendation of what they want to have happen. If we provide both sets of changes, and we say, this is what we think, in any case, I intend to go to whatever city council meeting this ends up on and say, this is the discussion the commission had, and this is, the recommendations we made, and here are the changes that city staff made, and you can take them for what they're worth. And I think my impression is that city staff, whatever we recommend, would like us to recommend something so that they can go to city council and say, here's what human relations, here's what we took into account. I'm sure they're going to do a legal review and present to city council, at which point city council makes the decision. So city staff doesn't get to decide one way or the other. City council gets to decide what goes in the ordinance. So we can present either or both, and city council is going to get a recommendation from the city of what the city thinks, city staff thinks is the best way to go forward, and from the mayor, obviously. And then the city council will make the decision in the end. So, you know, and then the lobbying of city council members by their constituents can take place, and city council can do what they think is the right thing to do. Whatever we recommend is going through 2 more stages before anybody decides what to do with it.
Very good.
So I'm not hearing strong encouragement to make the motion in either direction. Is that correct, or is that not correct?
I can see benefits and drawbacks for both of them. And I personally, I've looked over them, but I don't feel familiar enough to feel a pull towards one or the other.
I would agree with that. You know, I have briefly skimmed the ordinance, and I would like more time to actually look at it. This is stuff that I read for a living, so it shouldn't be too much of a burden, but I would like to educate myself better before I actually make a decision or have an opinion. I guess I don't really have an opinion yet, because I don't have the experience to know if there is a certain direction we should go.
I think we have a good opportunity here, given the consensus of those present, that if we move and vote to send both options upward from our commission, we will have an opportunity down the line as we discuss this and think about it, and to make an opinion known, either as individuals or as a commission. So that might be the best way to go right now.
I mean, I think, so I'm happy to make a motion that way. And I think, Fran, you're exactly right. If we go and hand both sets, I am sure, I can't be sure. I'm pretty confident that the mayor and city staff are going to say, boy, that one that includes us really is going to be way too much work and not a good thing, and they're probably going to recommend the, you know, don't make us subject to Article 3 version of it. If upon reading stuff you get, you know, more of a feeling that no, we should have really more strongly recommended the other way, you know, showing up to that city council meeting and saying, here are the good reasons that the city council should really look at what the other choice that the commission gave you and lean toward that. And I'd be comfortable making the motion to present these to the city council to clarify.
We could even resolve later and send a resolution up to the others, in addition to what we do now. So, right, if we decide in the next couple of weeks, I suspect that the city staff will bring it to at least the committee of the whole pretty quickly to get it on their agenda. Then it's going to take them at least a week or so to review and decide what they want to do about it. And yes, I'm sorry, Elizabeth, go ahead.
So my understanding is Carol would like to put it on committee of the whole next Tuesday evening. And then, you know, it could be acted on the following week unless council holds it in committee.
Right. So, but that, you know, if commissioners, if you two read it over, if other commissioners read it over, and really convince yourself that we should have pushed for the include, we can always call a quick special meeting to make a new resolution that says, the commission now resolves that you should use that one, not this one. And, like I said, in either case, the city staff is going to recommend what they recommend, and the city council is going to make the decision the way they want to decide. So, all right, then, and I will make a motion, and I promise I will send this to Tamara in written form so that we get it right.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
But I will read it. I will read what I've got and insert the right words at the right time. So I've got, whereas the Urbana Human Relations Commission has discovered ambiguities in the Urbana Human Rights Ordinance in the course of its handling of complaints, and whereas the Urbana Human Rights Ordinance is ambiguous with regard to whether the city and its representatives are subject to the complaint process described in Article 3 of the Human Rights Ordinance, and whereas the Urbana Human Relations Commission wishes the city and its representatives not to discriminate in its employment practices and provision of services to the public, now therefore be it resolved by the Human Relations Commission of Urbana as follows. Section 1, that it is recommended that the City Council clarifies City Code Chapter 12 to indicate one way or the, to indicate either that the city is or is not subject to Article 3 of the Human Rights Ordinance by amending the Human Rights Ordinance with one of the following sets of changes. Then we will include both as you both have them. Section 2, that in the case that the City Council clarifies City Code Chapter 12 to indicate the city and its representatives are not subject to Article 3 of the Human Rights Ordinance, it is recommended that the City Council ensure the commitment of the city not to discriminate in its employment practices and provision of services to the public by adding the following to the Human Rights Ordinance. And then I'm going to read this out because I did change a couple of words and I'll explain why. It is the intent and commitment of the City of Urbana to conform to the requirements of Article 3, Division 2 of this chapter, sections 12-61 through 12-80, in its own employment practices and provision of city services to the public. Any individual who believes that the City of Urbana is engaged in a discriminatory practice as defined in Article 3, Division 2 may report their concern to the commission. I made a typo in what I wrote down, so let me just fix that. The commission shall review the report, work with the mayor, city council, city departments, agencies, and officials in accordance with section 12-22 in order to correct any discrimination that may exist and report the outcome to the public. And the change I made was to change complaint to report, just so it's not confused with the complaint as in Article 3. This will just be a report and the report shall be reviewed. So that's what I've got as my proposed resolution. So moved.
Would someone care to second that?
I can second that. I second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Does anyone want to discuss this further at this point? Okay, let's have a call of the roll.
Megan McKissick,
Yes.
Peter Resnick,
Yes.
Francis Rigberg,
Yes.
Julie Schaefer,
Yes.
The motion passes. That is what we will do. Thank you again, Pete, and all of you.
And like I said, I'll take the resolution typed up properly and send it over to Tamara to be included with the minutes and forwarded to the mayor.
Excellent. All right. that concludes unfinished business. We'll move on to new business with the EEO workforce statistics. Elizabeth?
So I believe we just have 4 vendors on the list. One of them, I think the threshold you've been using is if it's less than 15 employees, it's really not something that can be fairly evaluated. So Waters Mowing Service, I assume they have 8 employees, so I assume you'd want to approve that for a 2-year period. Deuce Construction is on here, and we heard from Mr. Wilson earlier, and I know his desire is to have a 2-year approval. I don't know if you're going to be comfortable doing that now, or if you want to, wait until you have a human relations officer who could spend some time investigating these issues with union companies that use union labor. In terms of looking at the statistics and how they align with the county's workforce for the other 3, my opinion is they're not very close. One in particular is pretty far off, but then they're a fairly small business. So.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Would anyone like to make a motion on these approvals? Do we have a motion?
I'm still staring at numbers.
Okay, take a look. We'll have time to discuss this, even after we've made our motion.
So Burns Clancy is one that we've done before. Do you know, Elizabeth, whether you have what certification we gave it last time?
I do not know, but if you want to keep talking, I'm on the network at the city.
You might be able to find it.
I'll see if I.
So, I mean, in both the case of Deuce and of Davis Hoke, I think we're solidly in the boat of the same kind of setup. It's mostly union labor and the issue that we've talked about. I'm uncomfortable just giving them a 2-year okay, that's fine, until we have a proper procedure. And we should probably catch up, Megan and Julie, on how this procedure goes. So normally what we do is for contractors, they submit these forms, and you've seen the spreadsheet that Elizabeth and Tamara prepare for us. If we decide that their practices are looking pretty good and there's no concerns with what they've submitted, then we approve them for a 2-year approval, and then if there's still a contract with the city 2 years from now, they can come back. If we think the numbers are problematic, we either choose to certify them for 1 year or 6 months, depending on what we think we're looking for, and say, well, we're going to wait and see in 6 months or a year whether their statistics improve. We can ask for more information from staff to go back and talk to the folks and say, we think these numbers are problematic, but we'd like to hear, what is your affirmative action plan? How are you doing things to help? And usually we get back additional information from that. We do have the option, we have yet to pull the lever, of saying, no, these numbers are problematic. We've given them a chance to do something about it, and therefore we do not approve of this person as a contractor, which effectively is telling the city there is a breach of contract, and then all sorts of interesting wheels would probably start to turn. We haven't had to do that yet. Normally, even in cases where we think there's a problem, the folks are willing to work with the city and come up with some sort of affirmative action plan, and let's see in a year how they did. So I think with both, so going back to what I was saying, one other bit is less than 15 employees. We generally say there's no real basis to figure out whether they're discriminating or not. It's such a small company, and so for 15 or less employees, we simply give them a 2-year approval unless there is something in their application that is really lacking, that we say they're just simply not doing something good at all, and in which case we could call them out, but I don't think we've ever done so. So what I was about to say is, I think for both Davis Hoke and Deuce Construction, I'd be comfortable doing the 1 year so that they don't have to come back to us in 6 months. But in the meanwhile, it's on us to, it's on the city to hire someone to make Elizabeth's life easier, and and on us to come up with a plan for how to get plan of action with the unions, and be convinced that yes, we're moving forward in the right way. On Burns Clancy, so Elizabeth, were you able to find last year's or 2 years ago?
They had a 2-year approval in 2018, which expired just recently.
Okay. So basically, I think what we've decided is that they had 3 employees who were minority employees of some sort. Is that what I'm seeing?
I think what you're seeing is 3 female employees.
3 female employees. Aha. And yeah. And so we may have decided that 18, even though it's over our number of saying, immediately give them 2 years, or maybe, did they have less than 18 employees last time? Did they have?
I do not have the form from last time. I have the letter.
Just the letter.
I mean, I believe they are, in terms of local engineering firms, they're fairly small.
Yeah, no, they definitely are. I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. I mean, normally I would say, given how small they are, give them 1 year and explain, have the letter go out that says, we'd like to see what you're doing with regard to affirmative action, but we'll approve you for 1 year in the meanwhile. So I'm happy, well, I'll make a motion for at least purposes of discussion. I'll move that we approve Burns Clancy for 1 year, Davis Hoke for 1 year, Deuce Construction for 1 year, and Waters Mowing Service for 2 years.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion?
I have a question. Is there somewhere we can actually find the demographic makeup of the city so that we know what we're comparing to as we're looking at this?
Actually, it's included at the top of the spreadsheet.
Oh,
the second,
sorry.
Yep, the second pane of the spreadsheet where it says January 2021, the Champaign County workforce is up there.
Perfect. I did not, and I apologize. I only looked at the first tab. I did not look at the second tab. So thank you for pointing that out.
And Tamara and Elizabeth added that a couple of months ago, and it is just delightful to have in there.
Yes, I am a numbers person. I like to have my facts and figures, so thank you.
And one of the things in the future that we've asked them to do is also put in the numbers from last time they got certified. And again, probably once we get the new HRO and that person can gather together all the numbers, we'll be able to do that. But that way we can see year over year what they're doing and whether they've had a drop in workforce or something like that.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we will take a vote on that, please.
Megan McKissick,
Yes.
Peter Resnick,
Yes.
Francis Rigberg,
Yes?
Julie Schaefer,
Yes.
Okay, we have, that motion passes. Now we want to move on to complaint handling procedures that Pete put on. Go ahead, Pete.
Oh, you imagine I remember. Oh, I did put this on, and I know what this is about, but I think I want to defer this. So one of the questions was, and we're in a funny state. We don't have an HRO, and so there is this issue that people have a choice of where to bring complaints. They can bring it to the officer, or they can bring it directly to the commission. And then once the commission gets it, we then proceed to, generally speaking, hand it to the officer to go do the investigation. In these months that we've been without an officer, we've gotten complaints, and the questions that I had, and I haven't gotten answers to them yet, so I'll at least mention this, and then we'll come back to this later. Can we, if we've got a complaint that involves the same complainant and the same respondents and a similar complaint, can we consolidate cases? Is that something we're allowed to do? Can we do that consolidation before handing them to the officer? We don't have anything in our current bylaws now about how we receive complaints as a commission. So my plan was to start developing that. Basically right now, I ran out of time to actually even start researching. I've got to talk to folks at the city and find out what our possibilities are, and you know, get some legal advice, and then come up with some ideas of recommendations. But I think we do need to update the bylaws to have a procedure in place to do this. So I'm happy to keep the task until next month, if and I'm happy to dole it off on someone else if they want it.
Well, I would very much like to work with you on that.
Sure.
I think we do have some problems in other parts of the procedure as well that I think we need to address. And speaking of the bylaws, which have been resurrected from their dusty bin, that everyone has seen, I noticed in reading them over that we have drifted a bit from some of the prescriptions in that in those bylaws, and I would like to discuss that at the next meeting and decide whether we want to drift back or maybe make some changes. These aren't major things like the kinds of things we've been discussing hitherto. They have to do with the structure of the meeting, but I think it will be a good idea to take a look at that and decide how we want to go forward with respect to our bylaws.
I should mention, by the way, for Megan and Julie, I mean, we pulled out those bylaws that were, I got them in 2008. And I don't remember, and I believe they were signed in what, 2003 or something like that, before I was on the commission. And even there, I know that, for instance, the hearing procedures, we've updated since then with the large employer hearing procedures that we came up with at some point. So I'm not even sure those are completely current. And somewhere in the dust, we have to dig out and make sure we've got everything together of our procedures. And then I agree, Fran, I think a review would be a good thing.
Right. And if that was 2002, actually, it does fortunately state that within the bylaws, that if there is any discrepancy between the bylaws and the ordinance holds. So if we made changes to that ordinance about how hearings are handled, they would rule. But I think it's interesting to take a look at them, and I look forward to working on that. Okay. So we will discuss that again at our next meeting. And we have also to consider next the schedule of meetings for 2021 that Tamara has provided us. It looks fine to me. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at that and Make sure it doesn't fall on someone's holiday or something like that.
Looked perfectly fine.
Yeah, looks fine. Yes?
I don't see any immediate conflicts now. I think it's fine.
Okay. Megan?
All good here.
Okay. I think that's fine. So Tamara, those meeting dates will hold.
Those do need to be voted on, Fran.
Oh, okay. Thank
Vote
you.
on them,
Okay. We need a motion.
just to make it official.
Yes, thank you. Okay. We need a motion on the accepting the schedule of our meetings in 2021.
I'm happy to be the parliamentary geek this month since we've got new people, but you're going to be roped into making motions next month. So I will move that we accept the calendar of HRC meetings for 2020, 2021.
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay. We have a motion by Pete, second by Megan, to approve this calendar of meetings for the coming year. We need a vote. Thank you, Tamara.
Megan McKissick,
Yes.
Peter Resnick,
Yes.
Francis Rigberg,
Yes.
Julie Schaefer.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes. We move on to staff report. Elizabeth.
So it's actually been a fairly quiet month in terms of calls regarding discrimination complaints. Since you last met, I've had one phone call regarding a discrimination complaint. I spoke with the caller at some length, and I think she was anticipating what might happen in an upcoming conversation with her supervisor. And so we agreed that after that meeting, if she felt like there was something that we needed to discuss further, she would call me back, and she did not call. So I assume what she was concerned about did not in fact happen. We're also continuing to work on the Human Rights and Equity Officer recruitment. A lot of things in HR were on hold in the month of December because we were at different times of the month. We were down 2 people and we were in the midst of open enrollment. But the applications are going through their final internal review to come up with a shorter list of candidates. And I expect that someone will be reaching out soon to ask about having a member of the HRC participate in interviews. I don't have anything else.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay. Thank you very much. I look forward to that. Does anyone have any announcements they wish to make? Okay. I think we have concluded our business. Thank you for coming. Oh, I was going to ask our new members to introduce themselves, but we don't have many of our regular members here, besides the people that interviewed them. So I think maybe we'll do that at our next meeting, if that's okay. And this meeting is adjourned.